This episode of Now This Is Lit is brought to you by Audible. Check the link in the description to get your first Star Wars audiobook free. Everyone loves free things. Click that link. Do it. A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away. You're listening to Now This Is Lit, a podcast about Star Wars books, the people who make them, and the readers who just can't get enough of them. I'm your host, Meg Dowell. I use she, her pronouns. And today we're finally talking about one of my favorite books of 2023, Star Wars books, that is, Inquisitor, Rise of the Red Blade. We talked to, and by we I mean me, talked to Delilah S. Dawson about her experience writing the book, etc. Now I have a friend joining me to talk about the book more in depth. Charles from Gold Squadron Gaze and Other Things is here. We talked for a long time. I will warn you, we talk about a lot of other things that are not this book before we get to talking about the book. It will be a minute, but I promise the conversations are great all the way through. So stick with it, and we'll get to Inquisitor. And all the things we talk about are great. I had a great time. You can listen to the discussion now. I'll stop talking. Enjoy. Let's talk about what are we here for? I don't even know. Let's talk about Star Wars books.
We are here for some Star Wars books. I'm looking at the notes here that are up in my other screen.
Aren't they great? Aren't they so detailed? Aren't they just like all of Hope's notes? Which are no, they're not.
Oh, Hope's notes are fantastic. Compared to mine, I'm going straight from this to recording an episode of Gold Squadron, and like my notes, which are just for me, are just like, one of them is like one or two words, and I'm supposed to remember what I meant when I wrote the note. Or like when we do the books, I don't take any notes at all. We just go in completely like off the cuff. Here's what we think of the book. I suppose I should quickly introduce myself.
Go for it. Do it. Who are you?
In case people didn't pick up who I am. And also, I know Hope's going to be listening, and Hope's going to want me to plug certain things that I'm on. So if you haven't picked this up by now, hi, my name is Charles Rogers. I am a co-host of the Star Wars normally TV show watch analysis podcast Gold Squadron Gaze that I do with my friend Bradley, who works in TV. And I am also a cast member on the High Republic TTRPG podcast For Light and Dice, which I am on with Hope. So those are the Star Wars things that I do that people might know me from.
Both.
I also just did a panel at Legends Con, which I'm very proud of.
Okay, we need to talk about that because I was talking. Is this entire episode just going to be about Hope? I don't know. Maybe. Sure. Why not? We were talking earlier.
I mean, maybe. I could talk about how great Hope is for an hour. I could do it. She's fantastic. Her writing is incredible.
It is.
You should read all of her articles. Click on the page multiple times, actually. Click on it and then X out of it. And then click on it 5 or 6 more times. It's great.
She's earned it.
She's earned it.
Here I am. I'm matching your energy now. I'm yelling. Here we go. This is how
I bring this sort of unhinged gay person energy to every conversation I'm in.
Listen, this is why I invited you on, because, you know, sometimes we need an episode like this where everything is just chaos. Sometimes, you know, I'm on another podcast and I bring the chaos there, but like it's rarely actually chaotic here, especially when I'm like trying to be a professional and like actually like interview authors and other people who might be more important than me. And I don't know, but now we're here. What is happening?
I'm not more important, so you can rest assured I live for the chaos.
You're important to me. That's why you're here.
You said you were talking to Hope prior to recording this?
I was, and we were talking about Legends, and she mentioned that you'd been at Legends Con, and I remembered that a long time ago I'd been invited to Legends Con, and I was like, I don't know what this is. I've never heard about it, and so I just never responded. And now I feel bad.
It's new. I have been banging the Legends Con drum basically since I learned about it. I did a panel there. We talk about this a lot. I have an episode that I recorded with Ryan from Force Friends Rewatch that was recorded like 2 days after we just finished at Legends Con. We talk a lot about there. It's our Death Star episode. And then I actually had the con's executive director, Catherine, on a character deep dive for Ferris Olin 2 weeks later. And so we talked a lot of it. So I'm not going to rehash like everything that we talked about at Legends Con, but I specifically got invited kind of randomly, like kind of off the cuff, to do this panel on queer characters in Legends,
Love it.
which there's not a lot of them, but we talked about the ones that there were. And so I got to do that panel. It was me, it was Catherine, and Abel Pena, who is one of the Star Wars authors, was on that panel. And I've been sort of banging the Legends drum recently, especially around Legends Con, because Legends Con has got me like really excited for Legends again.
Yeah.
Like, I love Legends. I'm a Legends defender, but I hadn't really like dived back into it until I was preparing for doing this panel at Legends Con. And then also Bradley, who's my co-podcaster on Gold Squadron Gaze, he just had to do a like very intense reality TV shoot. That's what he does. He works in reality TV. So he had to do a very intense shoot for about a month. And I was like, you know what? Just give the podcast over to me. I will do some things. So we did a couple of episodes. We did 4 episodes just on Legends books. We did Revenge of the Sith, the novel.
Yes.
We did Outbound Flight. We did Death Star, and we did kind of the Jude Watson books through the lens of Ferris Olin. And I was also mentioning to you prior to us hitting record that I had just listened, I was reading ones that I hadn't read before. I just listened to Into the Void on audiobook, read by the mother, which was something I had to get over
No.
very quickly. It's read by January Lavoie, who's the voice of the mother on Battle of Jeddah. And I was like, God, this book is so interesting. I've just been on a Legends kick recently. So yeah, Legends Con was awesome. They're going to do another one. They haven't said when it's going to be yet, but it was a great time had by all. And so I will continue. Bradley always gets annoyed at me because I do a better job promoting other people's stuff than I do my own shows. Like, I'll go onto a show and I'll talk about like J Guys and Jedi more than I'll talk about like my own shows. And he's like, Charles, you have to promote our shows. You have to get people to listen to us. Stop promoting Dark Side Divas so much. Talk about us.
But we love them.
We do love them. I just love my fellow podcasters so much, except Chris from Dark Side Divas. Love is not the word I would use. No, I love that man. Sorry, I go off on tangents a lot.
Hey, listen, we're here to talk, to hang out. We will, but even if we didn't even get to the book we were supposed to be talking about, this is still already a great time. I've also been on a Legends kick. I just started reading the New Jedi Order for the first time. I've never read it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it was like one of those. So I started reading Legends books. I mean, they were not Legends yet, technically, because I'm old, I guess. But I started reading them, and I just had never gotten to those books yet. And then I think it was a couple of years ago, I was on Facebook for some reason. I don't know why. I don't know why anyone would ever want to be there, except I'm in this like Star Wars book like buying, trading group thing, which is a dangerous place to be. And someone was like, I'm selling like half of my new Jedi Order hardcover collection. And I was like, I would like that, please. And so they've been sitting on my shelf for years, probably like at least 2 years at this point. And I'm like, I should probably read these at some point. And so even though I knew all of the things that happened in Vector Prime, I was like, I'm going to read this book. I'm probably not going to, react emotionally to any of this because I know I cried. So I cried. I was like, this is too much for me.
See, here's the thing that I love so much about being a Legends fan that grew up with it. And one of the questions in the outline was, how did I get into Star Wars books? I'm going to answer that just because I think that's a really good question, but also it outlines really nicely for people kind of what it was like to grow up right alongside when all this was happening, because
Yeah.
I got into Star Wars. I was about 5 or 6 years old, and I grew up in a very conservative Christian household, and that is going to be important to some of the discussion of the book that we may or may not
Oh
eventually
yeah.
have.
Yeah.
However, and I do always preface this by saying this was then. My parents now are different. They have gone through a lot of growing, they've gone through a lot of changing, but back then they were really concerned with like media messaging. They were really buying into the post-Reagan moral panic.
Yeah.
And so they didn't allow us to basically consume any media at all, with the exception of the Star Wars movies and anything that was associated with them. So I grew up reading like Star Wars picture books and things. And then when The Phantom Menace came out, I was 8 when The Phantom Menace came out. And so I graduated up to sort of the junior novels that were tied into that. And then by the time of Attack of the Clones, I was into the Jude Watson books. And we went up through Revenge of the Sith, and now I'm getting into the adult Clone Wars novels. I'm getting to Yoda Dark Rendezvous and the Cestus Deception and all of these other books. And then that just, by the time I hit high school, I was now in all these like New Jedi Order books had come out. Legacy of the Force was coming out. Like all this stuff was coming out. And it just, I grew up alongside it. And the thing that I like being a Legends fan in his 30s is that there's stuff that I still haven't read.
Yeah, exactly.
There's stuff that I know what happens in it. But even as a Legends fan in his 30s, even though Legends is technically ended, Star Wars The Old Republic is still ongoing, and that technically counts. But even though it's technically ended, it's so vast.
Yeah.
That there's more to learn. There's always more to learn with it. That there's the books, there's the comics that were coming out from Dark Horse and Marvel before that. You can get into the old Star Wars insider stories that like Abel Pena was writing. You can get into the games. You can get into these crazy offhand comics. You can dig into some real wild stuff if you want to go looking for it. And I think that's really rewarding, both for me as somebody who was a fan of it for a really long time, and also like introducing people to it or reintroducing people to it. Somebody we did I think the Colton who I did the Outbound Flight episode was talking about how, you know, there's even things that they haven't read for a long time and now they're getting back into it. We had a discussion about Vergier on that episode, and because Vergier came up, Colton then went and reread New Jedi Order Traitor. Because they were like, oh, I haven't read this in a really long time. I'm going to read this. So I am a Legends, like, I don't want to say defender, more like an Legends advertiser.
I like that.
And I also think, and not to like go off on a completely separate thing, but I also think that's what's interesting too, is if you're a fan of the canon, people like to prop up this whole idea of like Legends versus canon, like they're two separate things. If something happens in canon, it'll be like, when are we getting our Revan movie? That was really popular for a long time. When are we getting our Revan movie? Now it's, when is Starkiller coming back into canon? Or they'll bring up the old Clone Wars stuff, but they'll use it as like a bludgeon. And I'm like, Knights of the Old Republic is too good of a game and too good of a piece of media for you to be disrespecting it like this. It's not a weapon. You can enjoy these things in isolation of each other. But also, if you're somebody who's a fan of canon, like the canon content, a lot of the bones of canon content lies in Legends. Inquisitors are from Legends. Like, I just read 2 Jude Watson books and there's Inquisitors in them. And that comes up again. So if you're like somebody that really, who's like me, who likes to treat Star Wars sort of like an academic exercise, that you really want to dig into why something is the way it is, how media evolves, how franchise evolves, how mythology evolves. It's essentially a mythological study at this point. Then you really want to go back and look at what Star Wars was doing, you know, around the time that the movies were coming out with Splinter of the Mind's Eye and the Alan Dean Foster novelization, up to Bantam Books kind of doing their thing post Heir to the Empire during the Renaissance, and then Del Rey comes in and takes over, and they burn everything down with New Jedi Order. And I think because if you look at it, I think there's a lot of value in knowing like what are some of the creatives that are writing Star Wars now who are inspired by Legend stuff. Where are they bringing it from? Delilah S. Dawson specifically said that one of the inspirations for a little novel that she wrote called Inquisitor: Rise of the Red Blade was Matthew Stover's Revenge of the Sith novelization.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
As was Mike Chen writing Brotherhood. Let me tell you, Meg, and stop me if I'm talking too much, please.
I'm getting an idea in my head of what we can do with all of this. Just keep talking.
One thing, too, that I don't, this is a personal warning. I warned people of this on our Revenge of the Sith episode that we just did, the novel, and I will warn people here. Do not, listen to me, listeners, do not read Matthew Stover's Revenge of the Sith, and then less than a week later, read Mike Chen's story Brotherhood from the Return of the Jedi from a certain point of view.
No.
I had to walk into my boyfriend's room, walk in, tears coming down my face, and go, I want you to commit to memory this face that I'm making.
No.
So when I turn to you at future parties and say, I cried over Anakin Skywalker, you can verify that's a real thing that happened.
To be fair, that is a really good story. I mean, both of them are.
Oh, yeah. If you read them one after the other, Mike Chen is basically doing like an epilogue to Stover's Revenge of the Sith. But I think that's one of the things, too, when I talk about, people should be encouraged to go dip their toes into Legends. If you like a thing in canon, chances are really good it's building off something that came in Legends, or even before that. Prior to Heir to the Empire. So I think there's a lot of value in Legends. I get tired of the artificial discourse between Legends and canon.
Yeah.
I don't know what y'all are doing, but I can read all of the books.
Yeah.
And I can like them. There are some Legends books that I don't like. There's some canon books that I don't like, but I also have my own personal opinions about things. It doesn't mean they apply to everyone.
Yeah. And that's why this show, part of the tagline is supposed to be, I think it's just on my Instagram now, is celebrating Star Wars books of all shapes and sizes, meaning canon, Legends, doesn't matter. They're all the if it's a Star Wars book, we love it. I mean, that doesn't mean that like you have to love every single Star Wars book, because I think that's impossible. I think there are so many Star Wars books that are so different from each other that like some books are just not going to vibe with you, and there's nothing wrong with that. Do you need to go around like yelling about that? Not necessarily, but yeah. Because I mean, there's a line, there's a difference between canon and Legends. There's different histories or different reasons they exist, but they're so like intertwined in each other. They build off of each other, and you have authors like John Jackson Miller or Timothy Zahn who have written in both, and who like John Jackson Miller especially had to go from doing Kenobi and then going straight into doing the first canon novel right after that, A New Dawn, and had to figure out like, I'm still writing Star Wars books, but it's different. And that's fascinating to me.
Well, I think I think Christie Golden might slightly predate A New Dawn, because Christie Golden had to go from Fate of the Jedi, which I have forgiven Fate of the Jedi for existing, and forgiving my, this is not a joke, straight up teen crush Ben Skywalker, a love interest. I think she went straight from that to Dark Disciple.
When was Dark Disciple?
Okay, so we have a segment on Gold Squadron Gaze. There's a couple of recurring segments we have, like the thing Charles fucked up. One of them is the thing Charles didn't research.
No.
And whenever I do this, you'll always know that it happened because I will start frantically Googling things in the background.
I could have just gone and grabbed the book. I'm like freaking out right now because when did this book come out? I just reread it for a thing.
Let me see. A New Dawn.
Because A New Dawn was 2014, but I don't remember when.
New Dawn beat Dark Disciple. It beat Dark Disciple by almost a year.
All right. Okay.
Yep. New Dawn first published September 2nd, 2014.
Okay.
Dark Disciple first published July 7th, 2015.
Oof.
And that
Yeah.
that is that is the secret to sounding like you know what you're talking about on podcast, kids. Just get really good at frantically searching Wikipedia in the background.
Or you're the editor and you can do whatever you want and cut out the whole thing and no one would ever know. Not that I would ever do that.
Yeah, it's definitely, not a thing Bradley has done where he has cut out large sections of just silence while I'm tapping away. Because I try to research for the shows, but inevitably there will be something that comes up
Yeah.
that I either don't know offhand or we're trying to avoid having to do the thing Charles up segment, which is a terrifyingly common segment to have to do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like we try to be knowledgeable about Star Wars or Star Wars books or the things we like or the things we are obsessed with. But like the reality is, if I could say words correctly, because am I a podcaster? I don't know. We can't know everything. And if anyone ever expects that we know everything, like right off the top of our heads, that's not fair. We're just people. We can only I can only store so much in my brain at one time. If more info comes in, something has to go out.
And I also have to keep like a bunch of Dragon Age lore in my head.
There you go.
So like there are other things that have to go in my brain. I pride myself on being someone who knows a lot about Star Wars, but I do think that the only person who's required to know everything about Star Wars is Pablo Hidalgo.
There you go. That's a great.
He is the only one that's required to know everything. Everyone else just being knowledgeable enough to not sound stupid. But here's the other trick: knowing and acknowledging that there's things you're not going to know and that you're going to have to go look up, and also knowing how to research really well and really fast is a valuable skill that they teach you this. If any, I don't know if you have any like college students or anything that listen to the show, but here's a little bit of advice. Your literature classes that you're currently taking that are teaching you how to research, learn to do that, and then you can start sounding really smart about Star Wars because you get really good at searching databases and remembering indexes really well. That's my advice for college kids. Learn how to research so you can win Star Wars arguments on the internet.
I've never really thought about how many of us who do Star Wars podcasting in some way use our degrees for Star Wars podcasting and not like actual work. I think it's hilarious because I majored in English thinking that I would I don't know, do something important with my life. And now I analyze books sometimes and I'm like, I learned how to do that, but I paid like so much money when I could have just like started a podcast instead.
I feel that so deeply in my bones because, Meg, do you know what my degree was in?
Tell me, please.
I majored in screenwriting, specifically writing for TV. And now I do a Star Wars normally TV show podcast. It's not doing TV right now because as of recording this, the SAG-AFTRA strike is still on. But that's what I use my degree for. I've written one pilot in the past couple of years, and I adapted that into something else. Whereas I have analyzed probably, oh God, at least 80 episodes of television, maybe more, depending on if you want to count the Clone Wars 2D series. So that's what I'm using my degree for. I'm sure my parents are very, very proud of me. They are actually quite impressed.
Oh, we're all doing great. I every time I talk to my mom
fine.
now, I talk to my mom and I'm like, she's like, what'd you do today? And I was like, oh, like I interviewed a person and she's like, was it Star Wars? And the way she says it, she's like, she's so proud of me, but also is wondering, how did we get here? What are you doing? And I'm like, I promise you it's gonna pay off somehow. I couldn't tell you how, but I do have a real job. I promise. It's fine, Mom. I'm doing fine, really.
I think my parents just get excited when I get excited about things.
Oh, I love that.
So if I come in and I'm like, yeah, I got to do this panel at this convention, or I got to interview this person. There was a unfortunately shelved episode of Gold Squadron where we interviewed a friend of mine uh, for reasons I can't talk about.
Mhm.
But unfortunately, the episode did get shelved by their request. And I was really excited. So I called my parents at one point and I was like, yeah, I'm interviewing this person who did this thing. And they were like, we don't know what that is, but we're really happy for you. They don't listen to the show because it is an explicit show and there's a lot of swearing and a lot of innuendo, and they're just not comfortable with that.
Yeah.
But they do know that I do the show.
Yeah. Oh.
And I was going to go off on a direction and then completely forgot what that direction was. Not unlike Ace Catacharys' entire life.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's so great to have love and support from the people who raised you. It's wonderful. And who didn't have that?
Ace
Main character of his
Catacharys!
book.
So
Wait, hold on. Pause. We finally
okay.
did it. We got there. We got to
We
the
got
book.
there. We got there. Oh, I'm so happy.
It
Well,
took
we've
31 minutes.
On Gold Squadron, we've had to get very good at segueing because you may have noticed I don't know how to shut the f up at all. And unfortunately, Bradley will feed into this
No.
because he's also a gay man who doesn't know how to shut the f up. So we've had to get really good at being like, you know what else is X? Y thing that we're talking about today. I segued. I listened to to get ready for talking about this book. I didn't have time to reread the book, but I did listen to our episode that we just did on Rise of the Red Blade, and I think I did some segue to the effect we were talking about the strikes, and I was talking about the AMPTP, which. Side note, the end clip of that episode, there's a post-credit scene, is me just swearing at the AMPTP. It just like every other word is bleeped out. It is hilarious. But I think I segued something like, and speaking of organizations that don't know what they're doing, I think that was like the segue. There was some segue that I went from that, but
I love it.
We have gotten really good at segueing on Gold Squadron just to make sure we stay on topic. We fail.
Yeah, probably. I mean, the thing though is that, and I swear we'll get back to talking about the book again. I would rather have a guest on a podcast who just loves to talk and keeps talking than have a guest who will answer a question with one sentence and then I have to be like, and then, which has yet to happen to me, but it does happen because, sometimes people aren't used to it. And here we are doing the talking. And it's so fun.
There's been a couple of guests we've had that I've had to prompt a little bit because they're clearly like uncomfortable with like they don't really know how to deal with the vibe quite yet. And that's something as a podcaster. Podcasting is a skill.
Yeah.
I think that's this one thing, not to like toot my own horn, but podcasting is a skill and you have to get good at it. You have to practice.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I've had to learn about being like a podcast host, particularly one with guests, is that you have to make sure not only is the guest comfortable, but the guest is comfortable with the general vibe. So I've had times where Bradley and I are just talking at each other. We're talking at each other. The guest is clearly waiting for us to stop so that they can say something. And I've either had to prompt them in or I've had to say, we're going to cut this part out, but just so you know, please do something when you want to talk. If you just wait for us, this is our vibe that we have as we just sort of talk over each other. Yeah. Please make sure that you like do something to signal so that I can stop us so that you can speak, because I brought you on for a reason. I want to hear you speak. Yeah. So, and it's sort of a little peek behind the curtain is making sure when you're a podcast host that your guest is comfortable and that your guest, we've never had a guest on the show that I think was like giving one word answers and things like that. Everyone we've picked, like I've handpicked be on the
Right.
show.
Right.
And so I know that they have things to say. It's just sometimes we have to make sure that they're comfortable or that there's room for them to say it.
Right.
I don't tend to have that problem.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I kind of created this vibe on this show where I'm just kind of like, and I said it to you a couple times, like even before someone actually comes on and we start recording, this is super casual. We're just gonna chill. Because I think for a lot of people, if they hear that, or if like we come in and I'm just, casually talking, not too crazy, just kind of like going for it. And if I create the vibe that we're kind of just hanging out, that does make it easier for some people to kind of be like, oh, I can just talk. And not that they forget that we're recording, but it just sometimes makes it a little easier. And you know what? I was going to ask you, are you comfortable? But it seems like
I am. I think too, when we're talking about like skills that have to be developed as a sort of interviewer slash host slash, I think the two hardest ones that people don't realize how difficult they actually are to do are podcast host and panel moderator.
Yeah.
I think are two of the hardest things that you can do as someone who speaks, as that's your thing, because there's technical skills you can learn, but you also have to have experience to read a vibe, read a room, read a person very well. And when you have a good panel moderator, you can tell because the whole energy of the thing is just brought up.
Yeah.
And when you have a panel moderator that's maybe not as comfortable, so either they're not comfortable or they're talking over the person too much, you can also kind of tell that even as an audience member.
Yeah.
So I think my takeaway from that is shout out to everyone who moderates for panels at conventions. You guys are the real heroes. I will celebrate you if no one else will celebrate you. Speaking of unsung heroes and people whose jobs are a lot harder than they look on the surface, you know who is really good at a job that looks easy on the surface? Is one Delilah S. Dawson, who writes almost exclusively books that should not be good, but are some of the best Star Wars books. There you go.
Yeah.
That's how you do a segue.
There you go. Phasma was my favorite book of hers and one of my top favorite Star Wars books until this book came out. And I told her when I was interviewing her, I was like, I'm sorry, but Phasma is no longer on my top 5 because this book knocked it out.
Bumped it off. It is Bradley's favorite. Phasma just straight up is Bradley's favorite Star Wars book.
It's a really good book.
Captain Phasma is one of his favorite characters.
Yes.
So he absolutely, that was one of the first books. We had an ongoing sort of bit on the show where Bradley never read any of the books. And he would only watch the visual media. And I would tease him by telling him, I'd make jokes, Bradley doesn't know how to read. Like, Bradley's just a dumb twink, he doesn't know how to read. And eventually he punked my ass. Because he went and read, I can't remember which one he read. I think he might have read Light of the Jedi first. He might have read Light of the Jedi and then Thrawn, I think was what happened. He read them, and then he didn't tell me. He waited until we were live recording. Not just when we were live recording. He waited until we were live recording with a guest. And I made some offhand comment about Light of the Jedi. And said Bradley wouldn't know anything about that. And he's like, no, actually I would because I've read the book. And if you listen back to the recording of the episode, you can hear the record scratch where I'm like, you fucking what? You fucking what, Bradley? He loved the Phasma novel. I also loved the Phasma novel. I loved Black Spire.
Yeah.
I loved this one. I love Delilah S. Dawson's short story Worthless from the Tales of Jedi and Sith anthology, I think is that what that one was from?
Yes, I think.
Anything right. This woman touches from Star Wars, it really should just be all Black Spire had to be. All it had to be. was sell me the theme park.
Yep.
And Delilah Stawson was like, I see this, but what if I do this story about trauma
Mm-hmm.
and surviving abuse
Yeah.
and redemption and the complex relationships that you have with somebody when the nature of that relationship used to be very violent and has changed
Yeah.
over the course of time, and how do you deal with that? And for good measure, I'm going to make one of the main face characters at the park a queer woman of color.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, Delilah, you don't have to keep going this hard.
Yeah.
And then she was like, what if I take this story? And I said this on Gold Squadron, but it's worth repeating here. What if I take this story that is about a side character that appears in 2 issues of Darth Vader 2017 and make this whole book about her, but it's about this insanely complex character and deals with the most heavy themes we can come up with in a Star Wars.
Mm.
It's crazy. It's crazy what she's getting away with
Yeah.
writing these books.
Yeah.
Delilah, how are you doing it? Like, how are you convincing them to let you do this? I genuinely want to know, like, how you convinced Del Rey to let you get away with this book, because this is some of the hardest shit I've ever read in my entire life.
Yeah.
It's a Star Wars book about a comic book character.
A funny story about that.
What?
So I had read that Vader comic. Read it. Had experienced this character before, but it was a long time ago. So I start reading this book and I'm like, oh, this is a cool character. I did not realize, because I was reading it before the book actually came out, so I was not having conversations with anyone else at this point until I got to the end where you get to that part in the book where it's the comic, because Star Wars can do that. And I was like, oh, wait a minute. Oh, it's that character. I remember this. And I was so embarrassed. I was like, I should have known.
Bradley and I had 2 different experiences reading it, because I had read Darth Vader 2017 when I went into this book, and I knew who Iskat Akaris was just from the comic that I had read.
Yeah.
Bradley had not read the comic.
Oh.
Bradley's actually reading the comic right now as we record this for the first time. We are covering the Darth Vader 2017 comic. So he read this book first and now is reading the comic. So in I don't know whether it's going to be next week or the week after. We also might have a Halloween special in there somewhere. I don't know whether it's going to be next week or the week after recording this that we're going to get to Burning Seas, which is her stuff.
Yeah.
I think it's Burning Seas. I'm like 99% sure it's in that.
Yeah.
But I'm going to be curious how that hits, having now reread this book, because as somebody who loves tragedy, I fucking love the Scottish play.
Yeah.
So much. And I love Sweeney Todd so much. I love tragedies with complex people who are in bad situations but are also making terrible decisions and having their own fatal flaws. So this book is like crack to me.
Yeah.
Like I'm thumbing through the pages like I cannot get enough of this shit.
Yeah.
I can't get enough of it. Give me more Iskat responding to a terrible situation in the worst possible way.
Right.
Give this to me.
Yeah. I don't even know where to start with this conversation, so we're just going to start wherever we want to, because we don't have to go in the order of the book or anything. And I just am thinking about how sad it is that you have this character who really is not trying to do anything wrong. I mean, up to a point. You get to a point where that changes, but not just, she's just trying to survive and live her life and figure out, like, am I supposed to be a Jedi? Because I sure don't feel like one. Gee, I wonder why. And all these terrible things keep happening to her. And like, I hate it. Like, the Jedi, especially in the prequel era, are not great. We already knew that. But reading this book, I'm like, I hate them, specifically for what they've done to this character. It's not fair, which is the point.
I have a slightly controversial opinion about the midichlorian scene in Phantom Menace.
Okay.
And bear with me because this is going to tie back to the book. I don't hate that scene.
Yeah.
Actually, I like it a great deal, and here's why. Because I've always seen the Jedi of the prequel era as more concerned with their religious doctrine
Yeah.
than they are with the core spirituality of their beliefs. And reducing something as complex as force sensitivity down to a science, literally down to a science.
Yeah.
And this is from Qui-Gon Jinn. Qui-Gon Jinn is the most hippie Jedi of all time. Like, he's a maverick. He's this guy who the council sees as this sort of loose cannon who don't play by their rules. And even he's going along with this stuff when we know that the Force was not meant to be experienced this way. But the Jedi in this era are so concerned about their specific doctrine that they've forgotten what the core of their beliefs are. And when you forget what the core of your beliefs are and you're concerned only with doctrine, then all of the stuff in that doctrine that could be useful starts to ring extremely hollow.
Yeah.
Growing up, you may have noticed this, but I am not a straight person. And I also grew up in a deeply religious environment. And again, I talked about this on Gold Squadron, so I'm not going to keep rehashing it here. But, growing up queer in that environment, and especially in the early 2000s, nothing there is designed to address your feelings. Nothing there is designed to really give you any sort of guidance. The particularly the churches that I was a part of, and of course this is not all churches, but the ones that specifically I was a part of, they had certain ideas of gender norms. They had certain ideas of societal expectations, and they were interpreting religious doctrine in such a way that they expected everybody to fit into these neat little boxes. And then when you have a kid who doesn't fit into those neat little boxes, you're not prepared to handle that. You'll just keep repeating the same things that seem to work for everybody else or seem to work for you, and that's going to ring hollow. The bits of this book where Iskat's going to the Jedi very genuinely seeking some sort of help, some sort of advice, some sort of counseling, some sort of understanding of why she feels the way she does. She wants to go out there and fight, but that's not a good feeling. And instead of anyone trying to explain to her why it might be a bad idea for somebody who gets as into fighting as she does, at her age, to be out on the front lines, they give her the same platitudes as everybody else and just assume that'll work. And she's like, you're saying these things to me, but they're not for me. They're for you. Like the things with grief, when nobody's giving this girl any counseling, she's not that old. Nobody's giving her any counseling. They're repeating the same, they're in a better place now. All of that stuff, it's frustrating to experience. And reading that, there are no gay people in this book. There's not a single queer character in this book. This book has resonated with me as my specific experience to a degree that very little other Star Wars has. And I think it's interesting to look at the Jedi in this book and how they've lost. When we talk about the Jedi losing their way in the Clone Wars, it's really easy to point to examples like certain struck things that I can't talk about right now, or other pieces of media set in the Clone Wars that show them as maybe making war choices or putting children on the front lines and how messed up that actually is. And this book wants to take a different, in a way, much more interesting and darker approach to say that in a lot of ways, them losing their way, they've lost their core compassion. They've lost the heart of what these things mean. Comparing it, you have in your notes, and I'm going to bring it up here, the contrast between them and the High Republic Jedi is astonishing. And it's the Order as a whole. The Jedi didn't just sit around one day and decide we're going to be so adherent to our doctrine that it's going to blind us to everything or everyone around us. They didn't just decide that one day. it was a process of the Order stagnating over time.
Mhm.
Whereas the High Republic Jedi, we see the early indications of what that's going to be. I don't know when this is going to come out. And I do mildly apologize. I am going to slightly spoil Shadows of Starlight #1 that just released last week as of recording this.
Go for it.
In Shadows of Starlight, the Jedi are dealing with a crisis. I'm not going to say what the crisis is, but if you know the High Republic, you know.
Mhm.
And there's a scene where the Jedi are having a meeting. It's this order-wide meeting. There's so many of them, they have to put them in the Senate chamber. And they're instituting something called the Guardian Protocols. And the Guardian Protocols are basically like an emergency kind of, here's how we're going to do things for the duration of this crisis. And it's things like, we are accelerating Padawan to knighthood. We are instituting combat training. No Jedi is allowed to be by themselves in the field. We're doing all this stuff. And the reaction from the High Republic Jedi is anywhere from, yes, we think this is a good idea, to, what the fuck is this?
Yeah.
Absolutely not. Are you kidding me? And I think it's interesting to compare to the way we see sort of the Jedi in this book, and generally the prequel Jedi, when the Clone Wars comes around, and we know, of course, that was a scheme by Palpatine to essentially maneuver the Jedi into this position, and they took the bait because nobody in a position of authority really stopped to be like, whoa, 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 whoa. Maybe this is not good.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to argue whether or not the Guardian Protocols are good. That's a discussion for a different podcast. But I think the reaction of the other Jedi in the room, where some of them are saying this, we're opposed to this. This is not right. Accelerated combat training is not right. As opposed to the prequel Jedi, where it's like, nope, everybody just do what we tell you. We're in a crisis. Here we go. My feelings on the Jedi in this book are very complicated.
Yeah. Yeah,
Because,
it's like, it's when
sorry,
like, yeah, when the Clone Wars are just starting and suddenly she's here without a master and she's like, I literally have never been in this situation before. I don't have any guidance. What do I do? And they're just walking around and they're like, we can't help you. Like, figure it out. Like that started like a fire inside of me, because I was like, she could be useful to you and she wants to be, and she has no idea, like she doesn't have any direction. So you're taking this like potential where someone could have continued to help shape her into something good, or try to, if that's what she wanted. But instead, she just had nothing, because they were just like, this is just too much. We can't handle you. We don't know what to do with you, which I related to that a little too hard, and I did not like it.
well, I also think that, the interesting thing with that too is that on the surface, they have these justifications for it, right? That the Clone Wars is going on. So we're shipping all these Jedi out to fight on the front lines. And nobody ever stops to think, why? Why are we doing this, actually? Like, why do we have to be the ones leading the army? Like, is nobody noticing this is a little suspicious? And it goes back to that thing of the Jedi in this seem, they are more focused on being a Jedi in the name as they are being a Jedi in the spirit. And I think we're really seeing at the ground level with Iskat's story in the first part of this book, the effect and the rot that has on the Order, and how that's damaging the Order from within, to not realize that that's the mentality that they have. Because it's very easy for someone in a position of power to say, oh no, we can't help you, and don't think about what effect that's going to have on this impressionable former apprentice who's just lost her master. She's in this big emotional state. And when she does try to say, like, hey, there's other things that I could do, they basically try to force her into roles she's not suited for, so she'll like learn a lesson.
Yeah.
She'll like learn things. They send her out to Thule. Forgive me if I misremember the plot of this book. They send her out to Thule, the mission goes sideways, and then they come back, and instead of addressing any of why the mission went sideways, or even acknowledging, like, the things that she did that were good, or like acknowledging her thought process in that mission. They're like, go to the library thing. Go to the library. You need to sit in timeout for a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm like, how is this helping anyone? Like, it's it's a very frustrating book to read in all the best ways,
Right.
because you also kind of see that Iskat is this very young and has some issues, and makes some decisions that aren't great even at the beginning, but
Mm.
it's this vicious cycle, right?
Yeah.
The Jedi are, no one who's an adult is stepping in to stop this cycle from happening.
Yeah.
That the Jedi do something that negatively affects Iskat. Iskat does not handle it well. Because she doesn't handle it well, the Jedi do something to negatively affect her, and
Yeah.
that she doesn't handle that well. And it just keeps going in this vicious cycle around and around and around until we get to her jumping ship over to the Inquisitors.
Yeah.
At I forget at what percentage of the book that this occurs. Also, that scene comes, love how Order 66 is in this book, because it comes
Yeah.
out of nowhere.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, it's just there, which is incredible.
Yeah. It's actually pretty far into the book. I'm pretty sure it's past like 60%.
Yeah, I think it's like 60, 65, 70% of the way through the book.
Yeah.
A lot of this book is concerned with Iskat and how the Jedi failed her.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing that I think that it does really interestingly is that it would be very easy to read this book solely as a book about how the Jedi failed Iskat. And that is a large part of the book, don't get me
Mhm.
wrong.
Yeah.
But the back section of the book is kind of a deconstruction of the whole idea that the dark side is better.
Yeah.
Like, we talk about Legends a lot, and we talked about Legends a lot at the beginning, and I'm certainly familiar with the conversation surrounding the Sith in Legends. And there's a lot of arguments because of the Sith code and how it's been interpreted, and how certain fans have interpreted it, and how certain creatives in that space interpreted it. You could come away with an impression that the Sith are better,
Mhm.
that the dark side is healthier, that you can tap into it in a healthier way, and that the Jedi are the ones that are wrong for denying people getting into the dark side. That they are the ones who are wrong for stepping in and saying you should not use the dark side. When really the dark side is just healthy self-expression and healthy passion. And the back section of this book is an entire deconstruction of that idea.
Yeah.
It builds you up to say the Jedi played this huge role in Iskat's fall, which is true, they did. However, when she does turn to the dark side, it's not better. It's kind of worse.
Yeah.
And more dangerous. And their stakes are higher, and she's doing more damage to other people. She's doing more damage to herself. That whole bit where she goes to her planet, something that when I was listening back to our episode on it, I had made the point, and when I heard myself make the point, I was like, oh, that's an interesting point. Love listening to old episodes because I love to listen to people who are right, namely me. But the point was that if she had gone to the planet, like if she weren't so far into the Inquisitorius by the time she went to her home planet,
Mm.
she might have stayed.
Yeah.
But by the time she gets there, she's so deep in the dark side. If she'd just taken a ship and gone, like as soon as she survived Order 66, take a ship and go, she probably would have been a lot better.
Yeah.
But the dark side basically says, it validates all your worst selfish impulses. And
Yeah.
Iskat has them over the course of the book. And the Jedi do a bad job of managing it. They do a bad job of being there for her. They let all of this fester. And along comes the dark side and Palpatine. And Palpatine says, oh no, your selfish feelings and your anger, all of that is justified. All of that is righteous. You should be feeling that, actually. That's fine. Never mind the people that you're killing, or the damage that's being done, or the fact that your relationships are incredibly warped now, or the fact that you're so deep now in the Inquisitorius that even when given essentially everything you've ever wanted, you are no longer in a position to accept it.
Mm.
No. the Sith have the right idea, actually. And I I loved this book a lot.
You made a really good point, and I didn't think about this until now, which is her story would have been completely different if instead of going from the Jedi to being an Inquisitor, she just left the Jedi and did her own thing. Because there's, bring it back to the religious comparison. Church, if it's not good for you, you walk away from that and you just kind of like live your life, you know, without that, you might not feel all of the terrible things that you may have felt before for reasons. Or something like that. It's way too late in my day to be making good metaphors, but it could have been completely different. She could have walked away from the Jedi, could have tried living in the real galaxy, so to speak, and kind of realized like, oh, like I can like work on myself and be better. And that's not what happened. And that just makes it even more tragic because she could have, in a way, saved herself. And instead, that's not what happened at all. Ugh.
One of the great tragedies of the book is honestly the mother. What happens to Iskat's mother, and what
Ugh.
sort of bearing that has on Iskat.
Yeah.
Because it's already tragic what happened to her mother,
Yeah.
who I'm sorry I don't remember the name of.
Me either.
But not only is this an incredibly tragic story of this woman who did walk away. She
Mhm.
walked away and she really tried, and she just, without that sense of purpose, without that sense of direction, she floundered.
Yeah.
And it ended very, very tragically. And
Yeah.
because that ended tragically, all of the Jedi assumed that the same thing would happen to Iskat.
Mhm.
And that's also part of it's 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 easy to look at this book and say the Jedi are the bad guys and they ruined this woman's life because they suck. And I think the book wants to have more complex conversations than that. Because yes, the Jedi refusing to like tell her anything about her mom, tell her anything about her planet, did have a negative effect on her.
Mhm.
But you can also see where they're coming from, where they're scared the same thing is going to happen to her. The Jedi are giving into fear. They are, again, they've lost the core of their beliefs. In their misguided compassion, they're really giving into their fear of what's going to happen to her. And if they
Mhm.
had told her the truth, or if they had let her discover it with proper guidance, then it could have ended so much better for her.
Yeah.
But part of the thing is, they saw what happened to her mom and they just assumed that's what's going to happen to everyone,
Mhm.
and particularly her. And it's this horrible, like self-fulfilling prophecy, like this setup to your own demise kind of thing, which is, a hallmark of all great tragedies, to say self-fulfilling a prophecy.
Mhm.
And there very much is one going on behind the scenes with the Jedi in this book.
Yeah.
It's very, very complex. And even like when the Inquisitors talk about, oh, you have the freedom to do whatever you want, that's also kind of a lie.
Yeah.
Like everything that the Inquisitorius is promising her turns out to be a lie. And she has all these fantasies about, well, maybe we can actually get away. Like she's towards the end, she's scheming to get away from the Inquisitorius. And she's like, well, maybe I can go back. Maybe I can get out. Horrible news is Catakaris about who your boss is.
No.
Terrible news about who you work for. He's not gonna let you do that because he's still in the he sucks hard phase. We haven't gotten to the current run of Star Wars Darth Vader comics
Yeah.
where he's starting to unsuck a little bit. No, we're still firmly in he sucks. So he's not gonna let you get away with that. And that is, I guess, that is the lore and the trap of the dark side, and that is the lore and the trap of, if you leave something that's as toxic as this cat's relationship with the Jedi, it's very easy for bad actors to prey on you, to
Oh.
take advantage of you.
Mm.
Uh, we see this a lot in the queer community, to be
Mhm.
entirely honest. That if you're somebody who's adrift, somebody who's vulnerable, then it's very easy for bad actors to not have you do good things. I'm struggling to find a way to phrase it, but and that's sort of the lure of the dark side here. Is Hizo, the droid technician? You know, he gives her understanding, he gives her empathy, and really he's trying to get her on this very dark path. And the Inquisitorius is very much the same way, where the Inquisitorius is very, oh, we'll give you freedom, we'll let you be who you are, and you don't realize until entirely too late that it's all your worst impulses that they're encouraging. That they're the dark side and the Inquisitorius is kind of bending her in the same way that the Jedi were, even more so, I would think, in that they were trying to mold her into something specific, and they were willing to do much more underhanded tactics to get her there. I have a lot of thoughts about the ending of this book.
Oh
and
no.
where it goes. Well, and I think the book is way more complex than it has any business being. And I think that it asks some really big questions about our relationships with, you know, the structures that we have. Compared, I was going to talk about a certain TV show, but I can't because the strikes are currently on. But I will say that there was an episode of J Guys and Jedi that I was on. And if you want to hear the counterbalance to this, go listen to that episode of J Guys and Jedi, where I talk with Hope Mullinex and Chris Honeywell about a TV show that I can't talk about because of the strikes. Don't go watch the show. I'm not encouraging anyone to do that because strikes. But you can go listen to the J Guys and Jedi episode that I was on for kind of a counterpoint.
Oh, and you know, all of Delilah Dawson's books have similar underlying themes of, and they're not all as tragic as this one. Although this book is so good, and I think everyone should read it if they have not. A lot of her books that aren't even Star Wars have these themes of trauma and survival, and how far do you have to go, or should you go, to ensure that you can maybe make your life better, maybe than it already is? Can you get out of the situation that you're in? Can you make the world, the universe, a better place? And this is by far my favorite of her Star Wars stories so far. And I really hope that we get more from her, because I think, yes, I think, you know, Phasma was great, Black Spire was great. I think, though, that every book that she has written has gotten a little bit more personal for her, and I think that serves her writing well. I think when she can really tap into, like, I know this feeling and I can like inject it into this character and make it relatable and tragic, and but also like very beneficial to read. The more that she does that, the better that it is. And this book is like spot on for that. And definitely, like, if anyone is on the fence at all about reading this book, I would say read it, even if you
Also, sorry, we just spoiled like all of the book for you.
I mean, this is a spoiler discussion, yes, but I mean, you know, you're here for a reason. If you I don't know why you're here if you haven't read the book, but that's up to you. I'm starting
because I'm just a magnetic and entertaining personality, and I just have a huge audience that loves me and wants to pay attention to the things that I say. No, that none of that is true.
I'm starting to lose my voice, which is a terrible thing to happen to a podcast host, but that's just the nature of life. And so I wanted first, I wanted to say that this conversation, both about the book and much of it not being about the book, has been fantastic. And I'm so glad that despite technology wanting us to not connect, that we still connected and we're still able to do this discussion.
Gmail, Christ. Meg emailed me. So Hope has been trying to set me up with this behind the scenes for ages. And Hope talked to Meg. Meg emailed me. I sent an email back. Gmail ate it. So there was a month, and we're not talking weeks, we're talking months, where Meg was waiting on me and I was waiting on Meg. And finally, Hope had to be like, so did Meg ever reach out to you? I was like, yeah, I sent an email back. I never heard back. And Hope's like, Meg never heard back from you. And I was like, God damn it. Okay, just give her my Twitter. She could DM me on Twitter. We'll set this up.
Oh, we had to use Twitter for this to happen. Like Gmail, you gotta get better, man.
Gmail,
we can't keep going to Twitter.
Your email client on the phone specifically, your app on the iPhone. I know that you hate Apple, but please, for the love of God, you have eaten so many of my important emails that I didn't realize were eaten until later. This is not the first time this has happened. But yes, I was delighted to be asked on. I love this book. I have a lot of complex thoughts about this book. And so it also just worked out I have a lot of thoughts about Star Wars books in general.
Yeah. And they're great thoughts. Why don't you, if you would like to be found on the internet, which I'm sure you would, tell people where they can find you. Yes, tell people where they can stalk you, or just, check out all your things, because there are many things and they're very good.
Yeah, so I am involved in quite a few things, and slight teaser, by the time this episode eventually comes out, we will have added more things to that list. But for now, the list is that if you want to locate me, you can find me on basically all of the social medias. That includes X, formerly Twitter. It's still Twitter, let's be realistic. Instagram, Blue Sky, Threads. The last two I don't really use. I mostly just have them, but you can find me at CW Rogers6. So that's at CWROG as in golf, ERS, the number 6. Those are all my personal accounts. You can also find me on the show Gold Squadron Gaze that I do with my enemy Bradley. And you can find that anywhere you get your podcasts. You can also follow that at Gold Squadron Gaze on TikTok, which is on hiatus, as well as on Instagram at Gold Squadron Gaze, or Twitter at Gold Squad Gaze. You can also find me on For Light and Dice, the High Republic TTRPG podcast, which is DM'd by Chris from Dark Side Divas, and I do that with myself, Hope Mullinex from J Guys and Jedi, Geeky Waffle, Dark Side of the Force, all the other things that Hope does, Jess from Rupalp's Pod Race, and our friends Colton and Robin. And you can find that wherever you get your podcast. That has socials, that has a Discord that's free that you can also join. And that is all the places that you can locate me.
Thank you so much for doing this and for talking about this book. It's been out for a couple months, but we talked about it, and I'm so glad. And I'm so glad that you were willing to come on and talk about the book with me. I'm glad we can make it work. And I'll have to have you on to talk more about Legends, because you have so many interesting and awesome Legends thoughts. We need to do like a whole episode where you and I just talk about Legends.
No, I had a fantastic time. I really appreciate the invitation. Shout out to Hope Mullinex for setting this up.
Yeah.
This was her brainchild. This episode was her brainchild. She was the one that set this up. So shout out to Hope. And yeah, I would love to come back on anytime. I have so many thoughts about Star Wars. It exhausts everyone around me.
This has been so great. Now This Is Lit is part of the Faraway Fandom Network. It is produced by Devor Mondum and written, hosted, and edited by me. Jose Jimenez designed our podcast art. You can keep up with the show through our Substack at starwarslitpod.substack.com and find the show wherever you get your podcasts. I have great news. I'm on TikTok. It's not great news. It's not great. I don't know why I'm there. That's at Star Wars Book Reviews. Right now I'm just posting old Instagram reels. Some of them are good. Some of them are weird. Go check that out. Follow me, maybe. I don't know. If you don't want to do that, I will still, and will possibly forever be on Instagram. Also at Star Wars Book Reviews, where you can find Star Wars book reviews and other book things. Thank you so much for your support, as always. If you want to actually, support the show with your dollars, you can do that through the Substack. You don't have to give money to read the Substack, but you can. You can start your free Audible trial through my link. You can get this book and other books through my affiliate links at bookshop.org. I will try to have different affiliate links available for you also, because I know not everyone wants to. Everyone wants to support their local independent bookstores, but maybe not for that price. And I understand that. We're working on it. By we, I mean me and my producer, who I couldn't do the show without. We're working on some very exciting things, possibly some exclusive content if you do want to support the show in the future. I will update you on that. But I'm going to stop talking now because the show is over. Not the show, just this episode. I really hope you enjoyed it, and I hope, despite my rambling, you will come back to listen to more exciting things to come.